Thank you all for showing up this morning. Our last panel was an incredible discussion of the National Ocean Policy. As you all know well, in the back there around the muffin table, and those of you still crowding the orange juice, coastal marine spatial planning is one of the very important 9 priority objectives of the National Ocean Policy. And in the discussion in the last panel, we've heard the term a couple of times of demystifying CMSP and what that means. So that's what this next panel is all about, provocatively entitled CMSP, What's in It for Me? On it, Zivian, we can have your attention. Thank you again for taking your seats and politely paying attention to the people on the podium here. My name is Sean Cosgrove. I work for the Conservation Law Foundation, which is a conservation group based in New England. We have 5 offices in 5 New England states, work on a range of different conservation issues. If you'll look in your schedule, thank you so much. Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you. If you look in your schedule, you'll see that I am not the planned moderator for this event. And we had one of the panel participants back out very late notice on Thursday, so we've shifted a little bit. The planned moderator is Sandra Whitehouse, and she's actually been moved to the panel, so you can hear her talk more than me. So I'm going to be the moderator here. Again, my name is Sean Cosgrove with the Conservation Law Foundation. This panel is entitled CMSP, What's in It for Me? So we've talked a bit about CMSP and the National Ocean Policy and the construct there. It's important to, again, remember coastal marine spatial planning is one of the 9 priority objectives of the National Ocean Policy. It's also one of the larger, more important vehicles for implementation of better ocean management, for conservation, for public involvement, and for science-based decision making. And those are really the 3 or 4 things we're going to talk about on this panel. What we want to do with this discussion is to bring down the level of discussion around coastal marine spatial planning and talk more about the concrete implementation and the real true benefits and values of using coastal marine spatial planning to improve ocean management. And so we're very fortunate to have a great panel here. First of all is Dr. Sandra Whitehouse, who is a Marine Environmental Policy Advisor, has worked on initiatives in Rhode Island on the federal level. Dr. Whitehouse is former chair of Rhode Island's Coastal Resources Management Council. She's currently the team leader at the Ocean Conservancy for their coastal marine spatial program. Our second panelist is Jennifer Mccann, there on the end. Jennifer leads the University of Rhode Island's Coastal Resources Centered Coastal Programs in Rhode Island and in the U.S., and also serves as the Coastal Management Extension Leader for the Rhode Island Sea Grant College Program. One of Jennifer's current focuses is as Principal Investigator and Management Team Member of the Ocean Special Area Management Plan, which we call the SAMP, which is a state regulatory effort to comprehensively zone state waters, including for offshore alternative energy uses. Our third panelist is a good friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Priscilla Brooks, the Conservation Law Foundation Senior Economist and Director of the Ocean Conservation Program. Focuses on protecting marine habitat and wildlife and building healthy fishing communities. Dr. Brooks is a leading conservationist, been involved in the Massachusetts Ocean Plan, and an advocate for a regional marine spatial plan in New England. She's a graduate of Cornell University, which lost in the lacrosse championship yesterday, and has an MS and PhD in environmental resource economics from the University of Rhode Island. Our other panelist is Dr. Steve Morosky, who many of you know well. He's a fisheries biologist and marine ecologist involved in understanding the impacts of human activities on the sustainability of ocean ecosystems. He's developed approaches for understanding the impacts of fishing on marine fish complexes exploited in mixed species aggregations. Additionally, his work on impacts of marine protected areas and other management options has formed the scientific basis for a variety of regulation. Dr. Morosky is the former Director of Scientific Programs and Chief Science Advisor for NOAA, Marine Fisheries Service, and was a key figure in the nation's scientific response to the Deepwater Horizon spill. He's now a professor at the University of South Florida. So the federal official definition of coastal marine spatial planning is as follows. Coastal marine spatial planning is a comprehensive, adaptive, integrated, ecosystem-based, and transparent spatial planning process based on sound science for analyzing current and anticipated uses of ocean, coastal, and Great Lakes areas, period. Coastal marine spatial planning identifies areas most suitable for various types or classes of activities in order to reduce conflicts among uses, reduce environmental impacts, facilitate compatible uses, and preserve critical ecosystem services to meet economic, environmental, security, and social objectives. That's a definition that is about 70 words or so. So our panel is going to do an exceptional job now of breaking that down for you all and explaining what exactly that means in real-world implementation. Dr. Sandra Whitehouse.
Well, I am very grateful that the previous panel actually did talk so much about coastal marine spatial planning that it's going to make our jobs a lot easier. I'm going to move sort of back up to the 50,000-foot level for just a moment. And really get to talk a little bit about what is the essence of coastal marine spatial planning. And I think that the essence of it is defining a vision for what we want from our oceans. Certainly there's a lot of people, we heard saw some great movie clips yesterday about some of these iconic marine megafauna, and certainly this is what some people are focusing on and what their vision is for a healthy ocean. We also have other folks who are interested in specific types of ecosystems, either a coral reef, a kelp forest, or a salt marsh. Of course, each of these types of ecosystems provides benefits to us as humans. In particular, something like a salt marsh gives us these, quote, ecosystem services in terms of being a nursery ground for fisheries, recycling nutrients, and also doing important things like buffering our homes from storms. Others, and I have gone to many renewable energy conferences to talk about coastal marine spatial planning, see our oceans and the renewable energy that is encapsulated in them as a great opportunity in terms of helping us as a country be more sustainable and self-supporting with respect to energy. Of course, we heard some questions during the last panel about how we can do this without disrupting the ecological aspects of the ecosystem. And then, of course, we also heard a moment, and yesterday from Thad Allen, about the need to keep in mind that the oceans are a big part of our national security system, and we need to keep, so for some people, the vision is that we have our ocean spaces with national security as a priority. And then, of course, there's other single industries that have a vision of our oceans that's probably different from many of the people in the room here today. But obviously, they're very powerful interest groups and need to be reckoned with. And then finally, in terms of vision, I would say this is what we don't want. This is actually a bay in China. Every single one of these buoys has a cage underneath it. And really, as far as the eye can see, it's entirely aquaculture facility. And clearly, this has gone to the extreme where only one sector has really dominated the entire space. So really, the essence of what we're trying to do in terms of look at defining our vision is to, and the essence of coastal marine spatial planning is to look at the big picture. This has been called ecosystem-based management. I know that's not a very sexy term, but really the essence of it is to look at all of the aspects comprehensively. The biological aspects from phytoplankton up the food chain to the marine mammals that we saw on the first slide. Some of the chemical aspects, especially important right now with respect to changes like ocean acidification. Of course, the physical aspects of the system, the currents and the wind, which are very important to the renewable energy developers. And then, of course, the human uses of the system, not only the industrial uses, but also recreation, tourism, fishing, et cetera. So this concept of ecosystem-based management isn't, brand new. It's been around in the scientific community for a while. It was really clearly articulated in 2004 in the U.S. Ocean Commission report, as well as the Pew Commission report that came out at the same time, that said we need to manage holistically on an ecosystem basis. But unfortunately, after those came out, not much happened. However, now with the new administration, and we heard a little bit about this on the last panel, we have President Obama and the work of the Ocean Policy Task Force coming out last summer with an executive order that clearly defines, for the first time, a national ocean policy and also a framework for coastal marine spatial planning that says this is how you should move forward with doing this work. So this is a real opportunity for us, and of course we heard a little bit earlier about the need for resources to be able to do this work. But I would really just want to show you a little bit about what coastal marine spatial planning is. So the goals, as articulated in the executive order, are twofold. Facilitate sustainable, and I want to emphasize sustainable economic growth, as well as improve ecosystem health and services. The report also recognizes how integrally entwined a lot of our ocean economy is with ocean health. We're not going to have a robust fishing industry or whale watching or any of these other uses, aquaculture up in the upper part of the slide, if we don't have a healthy ocean. So the essence of what coastal marine spatial planning is, I like this slide. I think it's very easy to see what it is. And my husband said earlier, took some of the words out of my mouth, but basically you get people together, you determine and gather all the information that you need, all the scientific information, and then you start using some of the new tools like GIS and participatory mapping, and you start being able to put all this information on maps. And by doing that, you can layer them and start to determine which are areas that are the most critical in terms of ecological resources that we want to protect. Which areas might there be opportunities for new facilities to be sited, such as wind farms, and also where there are conflicts in existing or future uses. So a lot of what CMSP does is to reduce these potential conflicts, whether it's conflicts between various uses or whether it's a conflict between a proposed use and an ecological variable. Another aspect, and we've already seen this slide in the last panel, of coastal marine spatial planning is that it is designed to be flexible. These are the 9 different regions around the country where coastal marine spatial planning will be done. Each of these regions has a different perspective. They're going to have different goals. The executive order lays out these very top-line goals of sustainable economic development and ocean health, but the way it's designed is in recognition of the fact that what is going to be desired by the people and their vision in the Gulf of Mexico is going to be very different from what the West Coast might desire and have as their vision for their ocean future. So while we have to keep ocean health at the forefront of this, we also have to recognize that it needs to be flexible. Another aspect of coastal marine spatial planning is that it has to be a bottom-up approach. It can't just be the federal agencies coming in and dictating to a region what they think should happen there. And this slide is actually from a SAMP meeting that Jen's going to talk about a little bit more later. These are a number of the public and stakeholder folks who participated in the creation of the Coastal Marine Spatial Plan in Rhode Island. And basically, they're the ones who set the vision, brought a lot of the data forward, and assisted in making the decisions and the choices about the future of that ocean area. Another aspect of coastal marine spatial planning, of course, is that it has to be based on sound science. And certainly there's some areas that are more scientifically well covered. As we heard from John Weber, and New England has a lot of data already available, so in those areas it may need to be just assimilated and mapped. In other areas, we don't have as much information, such as in Alaska. And I also would like to note that the science that needs to be brought to the table isn't just from the federal agencies, although I've used two federal reports here. It's also from the academic community, it's from the NGO community. Very importantly, in some areas, it's going to be traditional ecological knowledge where Native Americans have a lot of information they can bring to the table. So we need to make sure that certainly there's quality control of the science, but there's definitely information that we need to bring together beyond just what may be published in federal reports. And then one of the things that coastal marine spatial planning can do, and one of the reasons it's a great tool, is we can start looking at cumulative impacts. To date, most of our management has been to look at just water quality problems or just problems with the oil and gas industry or just the impacts of fishing. Obviously, the ecosystem experiences all of these impacts at the same time, and the result is often greater than, the problems are often greater than the sum of their individual parts. And one of the things that the NGO community fought very hard to get into the executive order was the concept of the precautionary approach. This is the Rio definition of the precautionary approach. But the way I like to describe it is if you don't have enough data, if you don't have enough information, you can't use that as an excuse to say, okay, well, there's not going to be a problem. You have to get enough information to make a sound decision in advance of that decision. And that's going to be particularly important in places like the Arctic, where, as I said earlier, there really is not enough data. So what are we as a conservation community going to get from CMSP? This is a slide, and I think Jen has a different one in state waters. This is about half of the area for the Rhode Island SAMP is going to be protected from industrial development. Now, some people may criticize this and say, well, just protected from industrial development, that's not a lot of conservation value. But coastal marine spatial planning is really designed to be iterative. And I see this as the first iteration. Certainly, one would hope that in the future, some of these areas would actually have greater levels of protection placed on them. And I think that's part of what we as a conservation community need to push for. Now, since unfortunately the American Association of Port folks couldn't come today, I'm going to channel some of them. I've been their speaker at a number, including their annual conference in Halifax this year. The ports have been very supportive of coastal marine spatial planning. I think especially in this political climate, it's critical that we have people beyond the NGO community and the federal agencies that are supportive of this. And obviously ports are a major part of the economy in many states. So why do ports care about coastal marine spatial planning? Well, one of the things that they do a lot of and need to do to stay in business is dredging. And the dredging in and of itself isn't necessarily going to be captured in coastal marine spatial planning. What is where you're going to put the dredge material. So this is an example in Maryland of the building of Poplar Island. This was previously, that's fast. A much bigger, this was 100 years ago, this was one big island. It had been eroded, and when the Port of Baltimore was looking for a place to put their clean dredge material, they worked with a number of the NGOs to rebuild this. And this is the island under construction with the dredge material being put on it. The result is that it's already starting to be a valuable species habitat. So this is a place where it's not just about conflict, it's about how can we create win-wins. The port needs to dispose of the dredge material, the NGO community wants more salt marsh habitat for some of these critical species in Chesapeake Bay. By looking at things comprehensively, we can start being able to make those kinds of decisions. Habitat restoration, this is from the Port of Vancouver, is another thing that the ports are very involved in. In many cases, to be candid, it's because they have to mitigate other problems that they're creating. But they want to be strategic about this. They want to make sure that they're spending their money with input from the conservation community and the agencies. Do they want to build a salt marsh? Do they want to restore do they want to take out a dam? I mean, they need to work and look at this holistically also. One of the issues also that ports deal with is stormwater management, which is going to need to be part of coastal marine spatial plans, because obviously so much of the problems in a lot of estuaries in particular is what's coming off the land. And finally, one of the things the ports are concerned about is the invasive species. Now, while that may not be of concern directly to the ports, they're obviously working so closely with the shipping industry, and this is a real problem with what the shipping folks have to address. It has become also a problem for the ports to be concerned about. So finally, I think that if we are collectively going to achieve our vision of our future oceans, CMSP really gives us a tool to be able to work collectively, and I would also argue that it's a tool that will allow the conservation community to have a greater voice in the say of our future oceans. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. That was great. It is a great benefit to have a ally such as American Association of Port Authorities, who we know is actually doing some very good congressional education about the value of the National Ocean Policy, and that's the kind of support that, you know, frankly, we couldn't buy. That's just great to have. So, thank you very much. Our next panelist is Jennifer Mccann.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Jennifer Mccann, and I'm with the University of Rhode Island Coastal Resources Center and Rhode Island Sea Grant. And both organizations have been around for over 40 years, working with Rhode Islanders and with our region as well as the nation to make our coasts and our oceans a better place to live, work, and play. We have been working with our coastal state regulatory agency, the Coastal Resources Management Council, for almost as many years. And when we were asked by our coastal program to engage in the Ocean SAMP, basically our role was to bring and to facilitate over 200 people within the university, researchers, educators, policymakers, communicators, to engage in the development of the Ocean SAMP. And also to write the document, integrate all the research, and, you know, make coffee. So we basically did everything. This is our coastal program. Our coastal program has the authority to manage within our state waters and to exercise federal consistency in federal waters. I'm sure many of you want to know where Rhode Island is. First of all, we're not part of Long Island. We are Rhode Island. We are a state. We are in between Connecticut and Massachusetts, so you might be driving 95, you go by Rhode Island without even noticing it. However, we are the ocean state, and our Ocean SAMP study area is about 1,500 square miles, almost the size of Rhode Island. So, and our history has been always connected, and our present has always been connected with our oceans, and we feel that our future is also connected. So it was very important that we got this right. This is our study area, and let's see. Does anyone know what the yellow line is? Not Sandra. These are our state waters right here. We have Block Island. Many of you have probably visited Block Island. So, the yellow is our state waters, and again, we abut Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York. Now, why we've been talking a little bit about offshore renewable energy. About 2.5 years ago, our governor decided that there was going to be a mandate in Rhode Island that 15% of our energy was going to come from offshore renewable energy. And we were just going to plop it anywhere, okay? And the idea is our coastal program said, wait a minute, we have a tool in Rhode Island that allows for us to sit back a little bit and think about who's using the resources, from people to wildlife, and where should this offshore energy go. Actually, and the university, again, was invited to participate in the process, and we actually said, well, we're not sure if there's a place for offshore renewable energy. So our job was to figure out, is there a place for offshore renewable energy? And also, if there is a place, what should the standards be in order to site it and operate it? So that was the university's job. And that was something I don't think our coastal program could say, because the governor was telling them to do this. In addition, the reason why the state wanted to do this is, one, obviously for climate change and all those good issues, but also it was going to create hundreds of jobs for the state of Rhode Island. What nobody knew, we knew that there's a lot of fishermen out there. We all know about the America's Cup races that used to happen in Newport, and will probably come back, but nobody knew exactly who was using those ocean waters. There was no report or anything, there was no information on that, and no one was asking either. In addition, Rhode Island Sea Grant brought together all the researchers that had anything to do with researching this area for hundreds of years, those who are alive, and really there wasn't much known about this area. So we were starting with literally very little information. In Rhode Island, we had a tool. It's called the SAMP. I love it when people say, we call it the SAMP now, because everybody knows what a SAMP is, but or at least understands it. It's not a four-letter word, however, sometimes it can be. The idea is for a SAMP to look at this area as an ecosystem and to understand who's using it and how we should be using it in the future. It's part of the Coastal Zone Management Act, and it requires that the stakeholders engage in the process. It's a tool with teeth. It also requires that it allows, for this situation, it allowed that the state become the driver in decision-making in this area. In the past, if you were looking in federal waters, it was more federal agencies working on these initiatives through EISs, and sometimes that took over 7 years to finalize, or 11, we heard this morning, for some decisions to be made. For a SAMP, it's taken us 2.5 years to make some very good, solid decisions. So a SAMP has been an effective tool for us. It's also been able for us to create the enabling conditions, we call them, to achieve sustainable development in the long run. And my director from the Coastal Resources Center, Stephen Olson, says you need three C's and a G. So those 3 C's are constituencies, a strong constituency, a commitment at the highest level possible, capacity to be able to develop the plan but also to implement it, and also clear goals, both societal and environmental goals. You can't do this with just environmental goals. It doesn't work. So here are our goals for the SAMP. You see both societal as well as environmental goals. And these goals reflect that we are honoring the existing activities out there, but also encouraging activities that could potentially help us in the future. Climate change is also extremely important for us in Rhode Island and is a component of every aspect of the ocean SAMP. We wanted to make sure that people had access to the process and that they had influence over decision making, so that this was a SAMP that people could see themselves in, whether it be a fisherman, the Navy, the Narragansett Tribe, or just the municipality, So this process was extremely transparent. Everybody got the same information at the same time. Nobody was a preferred stakeholder. Everybody was at the table as much as they wanted to be and had access to all the information and all the decision making as they desired. Some of the research that we put together, again, as I said, there wasn't much known about this effort, or this area, so there was a significant amount of research done by the university We had the expertise on acoustics, on the seabed, on birds. Just quickly, here's some of the information on the human use data. So here's all of our transportation. This is where boats go this is a pinger. Every 15 minutes, a commercial vessel gets pinged, and this is what it looks like. So our researchers were able to look at it and say, oh, this is where people are traveling. This is how we're going to organize our data. Like my Rhode Island accent there. This is the fishermen. We engaged the fishermen directly to figure out where are they fishing. Clearly, they fish over a 2-year period. They're fishing in this entire area. What about those regattas? The people love to sail in Rhode Island. We have great winds, but also it's a huge industry for Rhode Island. It's one of our leading industries. We have to think about that when we're trying to figure out where we're going to put wind turbines. These are the long distance races as well. So again, we're using this resource. This was all information collected from the ocean SAMP. And this didn't cost a lot of money. This was talking to people. What cost is the trust that you need to have in order to get this information. This is wildlife use. So we do actually, one thing I learned is you can go into cages and see sharks off of our coast. I knew there were sharks, but I didn't realize, I saw Jaws, John, and just about a movie, thinking about a movie. But you can do that in Rhode Island. We also engaged the Narragansett Tribe and the researchers together. So here's, according to our scientists, this is the way, many years ago, that's Block Island, there was no water in this area. So these are freshwater lakes. The Narragansett Tribe said that a long time ago there were villages out here, and then one night the waters came rushing in. The scientists were saying, well, maybe it didn't happen overnight, but there's possibilities that there could have been, villages right there near the freshwater lakes. So the tribes began to engage and actually we worked with them to write their whole oral history about this region, and it's part of the SAMP process. Natural resource data, I'm going to go a little bit quicker. This is, we looked at over 30 species of marine mammals and sea turtles in the area to figure out where they are, how do they frequent this area. This is the ocean SAMP, this line here. So this was the raw data. And then again, we were able to, the dark parts right here, this is really where the right whales frequent. So in the fall, you can see, and in the spring, actually, there are right whales in our area. So this allowed us to understand that. We also looked at the seabed. This is what a moraine looks like. So this is, we showed people, this is what this looks like, and this is a very important habitat for fish and other critters. So the idea is we need to better understand, but it's terrible for pile driving, for example. So it's good to understand where these places are. We also looked at the potential effects of offshore wind energy, and again, communicated this information to the people so that they were understanding the process along with us. Again, doing analysis as far as sound, and the pile driving is really loud. How is that going to affect the fish and the whales? And this was, again, communicated to the people. We brought Europeans over too, who have offshore wind turbines, to say, this is what's happening with us. According to biologists and researchers, this has been the effects of offshore wind turbines to our society, those kind of things. We also, as someone had mentioned, is we looked at, we looked at the wind. You're not going to put a wind turbine on an unexploded ordnance. So it's good to know where those are and just get them off the list. One of our researchers did a model where we looked at, okay, what is the cost of developing offshore, as well as what are the construction challenges, and balancing that with the amount of potential power production. So that helped us to figure out, okay, the blue is the good place to put the wind turbines, or at least do additional research. And then this is it layered with those hard constraints, such as navigational channels. As Sandra mentioned, at least in the state waters, we've been able, through this, additional protection for about 68% of our waters have been increased. This is where, this is areas designated for preservation, and this is where no offshore large development can occur, because what we found is the birds will go around the wind turbines, according to the research. The issue is the foraging. Okay, we don't want to eliminate the foraging areas of the birds. So birds, sea ducks in particular, forage in 20 meters of water or shallower. So those are off the table. Developers don't even think about putting wind turbines in that area. There's another rank of areas of particular concern, and those are areas not just conservation areas, but it's also where are we sailing, where's our economy, the transportation areas. And so those are areas where developers, you better think hard about if you're going to decide to put a development there, because it's going to be a long, hard process. We also told developers where they could develop. And when we put this up, the stakeholders were like, that's interesting. But when they were part of the process, there was really, nobody said, you have to change this, you have to move this around, because the decision making had engaged the public, from the fishermen to the people from Block Island to everybody. So they all were not surprised when this was the renewable energy zone, generally speaking. Now we're working in federal waters, again, with John Weber and others with this area of mutual interest. And this is an opportunity for us to coordinate with the people of Massachusetts and the federal government to determine where we should be putting offshore wind turbines in the federal waters. And again, the SAMP plays an instrumental role in its streamlining the process, and it's being very clear. It's putting the state of Rhode Island in the driver's seat, because we have the information and we have a strong constituency behind us. Future efforts, again, we're implementing the SAMP. We are testing those enforceable policies we created. We're also continuing to implement a research agenda. In addition, we were contracted by the federal government, because of our good work on the SAMP, to create the monitoring protocols for all offshore renewable energy in the country. So we're working hard at that too. And in addition, again, we're working with NROC, and we're also having a training tomorrow for 2.5 days where we have about 5 to 7 people from 6 of those regional planning areas coming to Rhode Island to learn about the ocean SAMP and to kind of get their fingernails dirty to figure out how do you implement CMSP. And that's all I have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. One of the things you'd pointed out was Rhode Island started this process with very little data about just the actual human use in the waters around there, although they've been used for centuries. And then what you've shown us is you're able to gather a bunch of those different data types, a fairly massive amount of knowledge and data together. In a nutshell, how long would you say that took the state through that process, just to get that data together and through the end of the SAMP?
Well, we were given two years to do it, so that's what we did. We did it in 2 years.
So it's still very achievable.
Well, every place is different, and part of our training tomorrow is to really look at places that don't have as much data. What do you do when you don't have as much data? But again, what we feel is important is you really need to get the stakeholders, you need that constituencies behind, the commitment of the people of the place, that they really see that this is going to benefit them. And that's the first step. But the data does come.
Great. Thank you very much.